The quality of your notes is only as good as the quality of the session. In today's training, we'll talk about simple, practical ways to improve how you engage your clients. Our goal at SCCW is simple: help you have better sessions with clients. Why? Because better sessions lead to better service, and better service leads to better notes. Your documentation will always reflect the quality of your engagement. If your session is shallow, your notes will be shallow. If your session is meaningful, your notes will be accurate, defensible, and most importantly, client-centered. So let's first do a behavior section recap. In the behavior section, you're going to have two paragraphs, the MSE paragraph and the observation paragraph. The MSE paragraph is where you're going to have your mood statements, the affect statements, statements about suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, statements about auditory, details. This paragraph, you're going to use clinical language. Your observation paragraph is where you can use more down-to-earth language. This is also where you're going to have your feeling statements. You're going to have your emotion statements, statements about what the client is wearing, statements about how the client did overall in the session. That is in your observation paragraph. All right. So let's now talk about mood, feelings, and all those things. Mood. This is the client's self-reported, sustained, or overall internal emotional state. So if they say things like, I felt sad for the last couple of days, or for the last month, I've been feeling anxious, that is going to be pertaining to the client's mood because it is sustained. All right. Feelings, the feeling statement, the subjective labels the client uses to describe their emotions. Feeling statements go in the observation paragraph. So if the client says things like, I'm pissed, or I feel like a badass, or I feel stupid, anything that is situational and short-lived, that's going to go in your observation paragraph. Emotions, also in your observation paragraph. Again, these are short-lived, specific statements. They're going to be statements about or related to anger or joy, fear, sadness. These are things that you observe in the session. I observed that the client got angry when this happened, or the client felt sad and they looked away when this happened. Those go in your observation paragraph. Affect. Affect is your clinical observation of how emotions are outwardly expressed. All right, so their facial expressions, their voice tone, their body language, those are related to affect. So briefly or easily, if there's a lot of things going on, their facial expressions, and they have a lot of expression, their affect is broad. If they have reduced or limited expressions, then you can say their affect is limited or their affect was constricted. So again, that's affect. All right. So an example of this is the client's affect was subdued or constricted, or it was sporadic or broad. All right. So if it changes quickly, you can say sporadic. If there's a lot of them, you can say broad. All right. In order to have good sessions with your clients, you need to, one, ask directly about their mood, feelings, and emotional state. Ask them directly. Be direct and ask, how are you feeling today? How are you, or how would you describe your mood, today? Why do we do this? Mood and affect are central to the MSE, and client subjective experience matters. We want to know how they're doing, and we want to be able to accurately document how they're doing. So this is some examples of how to do it in session. Ask, how would you describe your mood today? Ask, what feelings have been strongest for you this week? So again, you're looking for sustained or prolonged emotional states. So how have you been feeling this week? Or how have you been feeling for the last couple of days? That is going to be related to mood. You're asking about the client's mood. All right, so ask those questions directly. You can also ask emotionally, how would you say you've been doing? Things like that relate to how the client has been doing over a prolonged period of time. All right. So an example or scenario. The client says, I don't feel like myself. So you, as a practitioner or CSSP or QMHP, you would respond, when you say that, would you describe your mood as sad, worried, angry, or something else? So you're prying and you're digging in to try to really get those accurate statements from the client. In this example, you help the client move from vague feelings to a clear mood label, which improves both the session and the note. All right, here's the little tip. Use emotion words like sad, anxious, angry, frustrated, hopeful, calm. Use these words to help clients label their state. Sometimes they don't have the words to label how they're feeling. So it's up to us to go in and pull it out of them to give them more direct language. Your knowledge of various emotions helps them. So as you become more knowledgeable about feelings and different emotional states, you can now help your client express what they are thinking or feeling more accurately as well. So here's the documentation payoff. Here's why we do this and how this is going to help you in your documentation. Now you have both a client-reported mood and an observed effect you can compare in the note. So as I've said before, affect and mood, we want to see if they go together. Does the affect and the mood, or are the affect and the mood congruent, or are they not congruent, or are they inconsistent? So when you're asking these things and then you're looking for the effect or affect, you can see if they align or if they are misaligned. Number 2, if you sense something, ask, clarify, and follow up. Why do we do this? Sometimes what you see doesn't match what the client says. Clarifying builds trust and accuracy. So that relates to what I just said. We want to see if the affect and the mood, if they go together, if they're congruent, or if they are inconsistent. So what is happening? And then that's something that we can go through and process with the client as well. How do we do this in the session? You can say things like, I notice your voice is shaking as you talk about that. Can you tell me what you're feeling right now? So the things that you sense, their voice cracked, they disengaged eye contact, they're tapping their hand on their leg, all of those things can be cues so you can ask about and follow up with and go into to say, what's going on here? Why did you do that? Or what is it that you are feeling right now? Here's a scenario. Client reports or says, I'm fine. You observe the client avoids eye contact, the client fidgets, and the client's voice is trembling. So what you can say is, I hear you're saying you're fine, but I noticed your hands are shaking. Can you tell me what's happening for you right now? So you're inquiring and you're curious about the fact that what you said doesn't match what your body language, what your affect, is showing or expressing. So an example of that, the client says, I'm actually really nervous about going back to work. So by following up on what you observed, you uncover the real issue and you strengthen your documentation. Here's the documentation payoff. This gives you observable behaviors that corroborate, or contrast the MSC. So the things that you're hearing and the things that you're seeing either corroborate, what you said in the MSC, or they contrast what you said in the MSC. Number 3, explore client responses to skills. Why do we do this? Notes should reflect whether or not the interventions are effective. Following up creates insight and shows clinical reasoning. So how do you do this in a session? If a client struggles, you can say something like, it looks like that relaxation exercise was difficult. What made it challenging for you? So we're not only just documenting the client was distracted or they seem to have difficulty. We're also going to ask, why was it difficult? Tell me what was going on. That gives you an opportunity to hear more feeling statements and emotion statements from the client. That also gives you the opportunity to hear direct quotes, which is something that we ask for in the note as well. So when you are inquiring and when you are following up and asking how they are responding and why they are responding to the intervention that you're administering, then now you can give yourself the opportunity not only to have a good session, but also to in turn have a good note. So if a client does well, that grounding technique seemed to help. How did you notice a difference? Again, you're asking, it went well, but tell me what happened. Why did it go well? What is it that you noticed when it was going on? When you introduce or practice a skill with a client, don't stop at giving the tool. Follow up on their experience with it, whether it was easy, hard, helpful or not. So another scenario. The skill you taught was a grounding exercise. The client is struggling. You're asking, I noticed that was hard for you. What part felt most challenging? The client responds, I couldn't stay focused. My mind kept racing. This becomes both session content and documentation, because in your documentation, you can write, client attempted grounding exercise, but had difficulty maintaining focus due to racing thoughts. So now you don't even have to work that hard to produce the note that you need, because you're doing a lot of the work in the session. And then the note can just reflect what you did in the session. Here's the documentation payoff. This adds depth to the intervention and response sections of your burp note. Number 4, clarify emotional labels. Why do we do this? Clients often use vague words like bad, off, or not right. Part of our job is to help them identify the specific emotion. This goes back to having knowledge of the various emotions. So how do you do this in a session? Client responds, I feel bad. You would then respond, when you say bad, do you mean sad? Do you mean worried? Do you mean angry? Or do you mean something else? So you're giving them some suggestions on what they could be feeling or how they could be more specific. And then you're leaving it open to, if it's not those, the things that I suggested, what else could it be? Again, clients use words that don't really describe their emotional state sometimes. Our role is to guide them towards specific emotional language. So a scenario example. Client says, I've been feeling weird lately. You would then respond, when you say weird, is it closer to anxious, sad, or maybe overwhelmed? The client responds, overwhelmed. That's the word. So now your note can say, client reported feeling overwhelmed, which was consistent with anxious affect observed in the session. So if you observe them fidgeting, observe them looking nervous, the affect says that, or you reported that, and then also what happened in the session matches the affect that you gave in your MSE. Here's the documentation payoff. Specific emotion words like sad, anxious, or frustrated improve the accuracy of the MSE and observation paragraphs. Or it improves the incongruence between the mood and the affect, or it states or details whether the mood and affect are congruent or incongruent. But you can only do that when you're helping them to get more accurate about how they're feeling. So let's put this all together. Here's an example of a quick session. The client says, I feel off. You respond, can you tell me more about what off feels like? The client clarifies, I guess I feel anxious and a little sad. You observe the client is wringing their hands together, they're avoiding eye contact, and their voice is trembling. In the session, you apply a grounding skill. Then you check in. How was that for you? The client responds, I felt a little calmer, but my thoughts are still racing. So now in the note, part of it can read, mood reported as anxious and sad, affect was constricted, but congruent with the mood. Speech was soft, thought process was linear. Remember, your MSE uses clinical language. Part of your observational paragraph can read, the client wrung their hands together and avoided eye contact when discussing emotions. Client stated, I feel anxious and a little sad. During grounding technique, client appeared calmer, but reported continued racing thoughts. So notice how the session naturally created a strong note. Clear mood and affect, specific observations, client-reported experiences, and intervention response are all built in. All of those things just naturally come because the session was substantial. Better sessions lead to better notes. When you ask, clarify, and follow up, you provide stronger service to the client and gather the details you need for quality documentation. So remember, better sessions lead to better service and better notes.